Just about 17 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock on this Now Morning Show. Remember, it is Tobago Thursday, and we are heading across to the Sister Isle to speak to Miss Delisa Rollock. Now, Delisa Rollock is the founder of Rollock's Therapeutic Care, which is the sole provider of art psychotherapy in Tobago. She has been qualified, trained, and registered with the Health and Care Professional Council in London, England. Miss Rollock, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, first of all, I just wanted to know, there's something called art therapy. What is art therapy?
So, art therapy is a form of psychotherapy where persons use art materials to explore emotional issues. Now, the actual process of making art can shed new light on feelings that are difficult to communicate verbally. Over time, it is possible to evaluate progress by looking at the work produced. Art therapy should not be considered as an art class, as there is no right or wrong way to use the materials. The therapist isn't looking for an aesthetic work of art. So persons who have no prior knowledge in using art materials should feel more or less comfortable in coming to an art therapy intervention.
Right. Now, in terms of art therapy, is it just as simple as me going down to one of the bookstores and buying paint and buying paintbrushes and buying a canvas and starting? Or do you suggest that they actually, partner with somebody such as your institution in order to get assistance with that?
No. So art therapy, so the thing about it is that the same way how you would go to a medical professional to seek assistance when you're not feeling well is the same way you would come to an art therapist when you are struggling emotionally. So it is therapy. The art materials is just there to help persons to communicate better. So there is talk therapy involved. We use the psychodynamic approach where we get to the root cause of the issue. So each session is more or less tailored to meet the needs of my clients. I have clients that would come in, and based on their level of communication, I would more or less be a psychotherapist or an art therapist. So it's two different roles, and the roles would interchange depending on the client's ability to communicate. So, for example, if I have a client that has anxiety, for example, being in that space, they would more or less gravitate to the materials to avoid communication. So when I'm working with a person with anxiety, I am doing more art therapy because I'm a witness to their process compared to, let's just say, there's someone who is more or less looking for personal growth. They have some issues, or that they want to work on. Nothing is wrong with them, I would say, mentally, and they just want to grow. I would be a psychotherapist to them because they have a better understanding and they would be able to communicate better. So it depends on the reason why you're coming to art there, coming to the intervention. I would know exactly what role I'll have to play then.
So in terms of the differences, or one of the differences between the art therapy and the psychotherapy, is that the art therapy are for those who may not necessarily want to communicate, but they want to express themselves through the art. But the psychotherapy is when you bring communication into the entire process.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, all right, nice. You know, earlier you would have mentioned that growth that you would have seen over time, and as your clients continue to visit. So, is there something that you see as your client comes, let's say, in comparison to the first session, and then when you kind of look and you guide them in terms of the sixth session, the seventh session? Is there something in particular that you look for to see exactly how they have grown over that period of time?
So at the beginning of every intervention, a care plan is created. So once the issues are identified, I would know exactly how to more or less steer the intervention. As I said before, the sessions are more or less client led. So any information that you bring to the space is what will be addressed and treated. So for example, if I'm dealing with a suicidal patient, I would recommend that, I see that individual every week because I more or less want to be able to create that calm or balance, restore balance to this individual, compared to somebody who is just looking for personal growth. I would more or less recommend bi-weekly sessions. So the thing about it is that I have short-term and long-term interventions, and depending on your issue, I would know exactly what you would be needed. What's the best recommendation for you? Sorry.
Right. And I know that you are a psychotherapist, and I'm wondering because you would have mentioned, maybe you have a client, who may have had suicidal thoughts. And so, what is the benefits of psychotherapy, let's say, as opposed to, that person visiting a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Okay, so I am there to be a witness, as I said. I'm here to be a witness. I'm not here to tell clients what to do, but to help them to see things from a different perspective. Most times, when the words become difficult, when you create that platform for art making or for creativity, as I should say, you would more or less, it's all about the client. It's not about me. I'm not there to tell you what to do, but to more or less guide you, help you to see things from a different perspective. And even when you are confused and you just want a second opinion or person's, a professional viewpoint on things, because the thing about it is that my background, my first degree is in visual arts, so I have a better understanding of clients' work. And I think with the training of finance and psychology fused together, I will be able to help my clients using both forms of mediums.
Right. And how have people been responding to this? Because I know globally it isn't a new practice, but I feel like locally we are now getting accustomed to something like this. So what has been the response thus far?
Um, Thus far, my clientele is increasing. I have to more or less bring awareness to what art therapy is, because I think when you hear art therapy, you're more or less thinking, well, it's something trivial or it's something child related. No, art therapy could be used with individuals of all ages, children, adolescents, adults, older adults, depending on your condition, even persons with mental health issues, um, older adults with Alzheimer's. They all can also benefit from the intervention. Persons
Right.
who are experiencing abuse, verbal abuse, victims of abuse, anxiety, depression. Once you are committed to that change, I believe that the intervention can be beneficial to anyone.
No, I love that you mentioned the age group that this art therapy covers, because I know that students are expected to go back out to school next week, Monday. And so how can we use this to mentally prepare them for what they are going to experience? Because for some, it might be the first time, of them, stepping in a classroom and, being around other people. So how can we use that to prepare them for this new phase?
Okay, so to avoid coming to an art therapist, I will strongly recommend that persons be more aware of their emotions. Uh, Parents and children, it's been a couple years, since that, everybody is back out into that new environment. COVID is still very much active. I will strongly recommend that persons could use journaling. They could use the materials to more or less write down their issues. So example, if it is that I enter, for example, the children, you enter that environment for the first time, for example, the first formers, you may feel some form of anxiety. What am I supposed to do in that moment? I would try to say, calm yourself, think of something that you know is peaceful to you. If it is in that moment, you could jot it down, or you could do a quick sketch about it. You can do so, because at the end of it all, you want to be able to be in control of your emotions.
Right. And I'm just wondering, how do the sessions work? So, for example, is it that a client will come to you and that they will begin painting? Is it that they will begin sketching? Is it that they will be coloring? How exactly does it work?
So the session is broken up into three different segments. The first segment is called the check-in segment, where I allow clients to more or less raise their issues. We talk about it. In that segment, if I realize that communication becomes difficult, I would then invite the client to the table. I have a wide range of art materials there where persons could create. So there's time allotted for art making. And then at the end, there is something called the reflection, where persons have the ability or the opportunity, to talk about the work produced. If in that moment they don't want to talk about it, it's totally fine. I can't force my clients to speak about the work. At the end of the session, I keep all the work safe, because when you deal with an issue, you don't want to more or less carry that issue with you. So at the end of the intervention, say for example, if it's a 6-week or a 12-week intervention, at the end of the intervention, the work is yours to carry with you. But if you are not, or if you don't want to carry that work, then I am obligated to hold on to the work for a specific period in time.
Right. And I'm just wondering what's next. So, for example, a client would have stayed with you, let's say, for 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And so the first question is, does that time frame ensure that the person deals with their issue? And have you ever experienced any sort of intervention where you may have had to recommend that this person see another psychiatrist or somebody to get that additional help?
Yes. So, for example, I have very little knowledge in working with children with Down syndrome. So, for example, I had a client that came to me, and I believe based on the client's presentation, they had very little exposure to socialization. So when they came to me, everything they were so intrigued by all the materials, everything was just thrown on the ground. Um, they weren't responding to, simple conversation. I couldn't reach that child at all, at all, at all. So I did recommend additional services to another practitioner. So yeah.
Right. And in terms of the end of the therapy, do you check in with clients? Do they check in with you? Is it that somebody can be okay now, but then maybe next month they may revisit for another session, or to start another form of treatment?
Yes, so in order for the intervention to be successful, you have to be able to commit to the intervention. So if you are seeing me once a week or you're seeing me every other week, yes, I would definitely, if a client wants impromptu session, if I'm available, I do make myself available for them, depending. So yeah. So it all depends on my availability and the client, and also their condition.
Right. So if they had a 6-week treatment set up and they still want additional services, they can call you and you will reach out to them and they can start something over again.
Yes.
Okay.
So there is no time frame allotted
Right.
for therapy.
Right.
Short-term intervention, if it is that you really want to see some form of progress, I would say 6 to 8 weeks. But thereafter, if it is that my client wants to continue, they can do so.
Of course. Now, you would have mentioned the client that you had who had the child with Down syndrome. I'm wondering, what about other sorts of disabilities? So, for example, children who may have ADHD or those who may have dyslexia. Do your services cover that range as well?
Yes, I have worked with children with ADHD and also dyslexia. Yeah. Autism
Okay.
as well.
Of course. Nice. And so I'm just wondering, how would you have gotten into this, into, art therapy? Because I know a lot of people, they will do psychology, they will do psychiatry, but then we have art therapy. I find that so interesting. How did you get into this?
So before migrating to study art therapy, I was actually a teacher, a secondary school teacher, and it was my experience there that led me to go and study art therapy. I demonstrated a lot of pastoral care to my students, and I would always remember a senior teacher at Bishop's, because I used to teach Bishop's High School in Tobago before, and Miss James Stewart, based on observation, she was like, why don't you just get into art therapy? You are very passionate about students, and then students, young people like you, so why not? I did my research, and the rest was history. I mean to say, when I went to England, it was a total culture shock, everything, because I was thinking that, okay, I'm just going to be using the materials to help these people, but there was more psychology in the art therapy that I don't think at the moment I was prepared for. But over the years, I definitely have seen growth in me and my practice. Sorry.
Of course. And I also wanted to get your thoughts on using art as a form of therapy. So not just visual art, but in terms of dancing, in terms of poetry. I mean, how important do you think it is for parents to encourage their children to, do some form of art, to mentally help them and prepare them as they go back out to school?
There's a saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I think as adults, as we get older, we because the demands of everyday life, we may more or less stray from things that used to bring us some form of joy. I do believe that engaging children in the arts, as you said, dancing, visual arts, even extra co-curricular activities, I think it more or less adds some form of balance to you. And I think when you take that out, persons more or less become flustered. So to avoid all of that, I think that we should encourage our children, and even these disciplines, it also helps overall with the child's development. So don't take the arts away from them. If you know that your child is interested in the dancing or any form of curricular activity, encourage them, because it's definitely going to improve their academics and overall development as an individual.
Right. And now quickly on the flip side, how can art help, the elderly population, those who are in homes, those who may not have, that kind of family support that they're supposed to? How can art help them as well?
I think when you allow creativity to present itself, art more or less, it becomes a safe space. So for example, with the elderly, if it is that for example, I would use a lot of magazines with the elderly, because you never know exactly what they're going to see. Sometimes you may just be flipping through a magazine and you may see an image that may bring some form of memory to you, and that memory could be a positive memory, and it would just boost your self-esteem, or even that moment in time. So I think that when you give them materials to explore, it would more or less help in whatever condition they're experiencing.
Well, Ms. Rollock, let me thank you so much for coming on the Now Morning Show and just sharing a little bit about art therapy and psychotherapy. And I wish you all the best with your business in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And that was Ms. Delisa Rollock, who is the founder at Rollock's Therapeutic Care in Tobago. Of course, is the sole provider of art and psychotherapy in Tobago. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. We have so much more. Stay with us.